Not having the best reputation when it comes to quality and reliability has a silver lining. It means that British sports cars of the 90s and the noughties offer absolutely unrivaled value. In this video, I'm going to show you examples of Aston Martin, Bentley, Jaguar, Lotus and TVRs that you can buy right now for less than £10,000. Let's start off with Aston Martin. At this sort of price point, we're going to be looking at the DB7. Now this used what was basically Jaguar XKR underpinnings, but they were restructured and redone by TWR. When it was first released, the reviews were very, very good. It uses the Jaguar AJ6 straight 6 engine, but with an Eaton supercharger for more power, torque and economy than the old Aston V8s. And they made a big deal about using composite materials on the body and structure, but still, it weighed 100 kilograms more than the XK8, the Jaguar XK8 that followed afterwards. So look, it's not a perfect Aston, but it is still an Aston for under £10,000. So immediately there's two that have popped up. Now I can see that at least one of them is in a wrecker's yard. This looks a bit more promising. Okay, this is another, still a salvage yard. I think the same one. There's scratches on every single panel. That looks like a bum. Someone, maybe an ex-wife, has obviously got involved and wasn't very happy with somebody, I would assume. This doesn't look like a great option either. So we are on to the next. This is £10,995, so over budget, but I think definitely within negotiation. The downside is that it is a convertible. That might not be to everybody's taste. 67,000 miles, which isn't too bad. And then that interior, which I think looks better than XK8 interior, but apparently they weren't quite as well built. It's one of those where there's absolutely no information. So these aren't the best examples, but I want to show you something else when it comes to a DB7, and that is this. So only a week or so ago, this sold, 1995, DB7 Coupe, sold, including the buyer's premium, for an incredible £8,856. Now, I'm not that sure about the lipstick on there. I doubt that that is original. But from the look of it, this is a nice, presentable car sold at a very, very good price. It is a manual, quite importantly. I think one of the two salvage ones was actually an auto, which I would want to personally still steer well clear of. 95,000 miles, not necessarily a bad thing. MOT through to September 2025, so that's great. That's a long MOT, that's almost a year. Gas suspension, uprated front springs, running well, no mechanical electrical issues. You can't really completely trust auctions when it comes to this. You would have to go and have a look at this before you put any bids in, but it does show that they are available and you can get a bit of an Aston bargain if you look. Next, we're going to be looking at what I think is the performance bargain of the century. It is a Jaguar XKR, the X150. This was completely from the ground up, a blank sheet design. It had all aluminium bodywork, so it saved 100 kilos in weight, which is pretty significant. The R that we're going to be looking at has 410 horsepower from a supercharged 4.2 litre V8. So that means 4.8 seconds 0 to 60. It won't rival a 911 for ultimate handling. It's got less finesse, but it's also much more comfortable, and in some ways it's more fun and characterful. This really is the ultimate all-rounder. So sorted it by price, so it brings the X100s, the earlier model, up first, and the convertibles, of course. Okay, we have one here for 5,500. That's just too cheap. It is bound to have problems, but let's see if we can find something which looks a little bit more sensible. £7,500, still very cheap. Let's take a look at that. The wheels are a little bit curbed, actually quite heavily curbed, but you would expect that at this price. This will not be a perfect car. The perforated leather on the seats means that this has the extended leather package. But it is really important because if there is one downside to these, it's that the inside, they do not feel very upmarket. The extended leather, it really helps to lift the whole ambience of the thing. Because this is a pre-facelift, it has the old-fashioned J-gate, which might not look as flash as the rotary dial that came later on in the facelifts, but I find it much easier and more intuitive to use. There is one thing, these displays, the infotainment system on these is awful, but it's about the way these drive. They are so good. This is a 2008, nice colour. I like the darker colours because you can see the side fins in silver, which I think it's a detail that I really like about these. Very handsome things. Interior with the darker piano black finish here. But, tellingly, I can see that this doesn't have the perforated leather on the seats. So this one doesn't have the extended leather package, which is a little bit of a shame and a downside. Longish MOT is okay. Mentions here, front tyres, coil packs, spark plugs, wishbones, bushes, new battery and more, which is nice. Couple of bad points. Roof lining, wouldn't let that upset me too much. Not too difficult to change on one of these. And you can buy them for about 180 and just replace the whole shell. It's maybe an afternoon's work if you know what you're doing. Pedestrian sensor warning light, common issue and again easy to fix. It is a common issue, the pedestrian sensor, and I think it's got to do with the bonnet and when it sort of jumps up if someone hits it. However, I don't know if that's easy to fix. So that is a bit of a question mark, but overall, this looks like potentially a good buy. As with all the cars that I'm going to tell you about, I don't know them, I'm not recommending them, you'd have to do your own research. I'm just showing you some examples of cars at that price. Now let's take a look at what TVR has to offer. At this price point, there's a couple of options really, either the early sort of wedge-shaped TVRs or one of the 90s Chimeras, which offer unbelievable value. And for me, it would have to be one of those. It has the same chassis and Rover V8 as the Griffith, but at about a third of the price. Despite TVR's reputation, this really is much more of a tourer than you'd think. It's got great torque, a creamy V8, and comfortable suspension. It feels very similar to a Merc SL of the same era. So straight away on eBay, we can see a couple of cheapies. Now this one hasn't been started for over 10 years, so I think we'll just skip over that. But this looks very promising. 1993, it's the 4 litre, so 240 horsepower, which honestly in these cars is plenty. You can get a 500, they're much more expensive, but I don't think you need the power. Full body off rebuild, let's take a look. £8,000 in the pictures. I think in that red colour it looks stunning. This is the money shot here, look at that. So there's a receipt for £5,000, which I think will be for the chassis riggers. Interior, the interior on these, they look great. They're not very well assembled, so you might have to do a little bit of work to smarten it up. But generally speaking, the design of it, I think, is brilliant. That knob that you see there is actually to open the doors, isn't it? It's just TVRs are so crazy and so brilliant. So mileage is 63,000, which if true is low-ish. Service history, full body of rebuild, new outriggers. This is really important because these cars, one of the worst areas they tend to go, which is expensive, as you can see on this, is the outside bits of the chassis, which rust. I'd be tempted though to look at this. It's another red one on Auto Trader, 10,200. It's a Cat D, but Cat D is cosmetic. And if we have a look through, this has a long, nice description, which I like to see when owners, this obviously be owned by someone who is an enthusiast. They have receipts totaling 8.5k with all the important issues being sorted. So that is a good sign. And here is the thing about the not so good is a Cat D marker, which was for a rear accident in 2009. Has had a new rear quarter, high standard of repair. You'd have to see it, but I really wouldn't dismiss this for being a Cat D. Sounds like it's been owned by someone who loves them, and that is worth incalculable money in itself. One more oddball I want to talk to you about. It's not within budget, but while I was searching for cheap TVRs, this came up and it's one of my all-time favourites and I just had to show it to you. So, the Cerberus with the T350. They are I love all the modern ones, most of the old ones as well, but the Cerberus T350 are incredible cars. This is the cheapest I've seen in a long time, 17,500. Obviously it will be less than perfect. It doesn't look too bad in the pictures. I think there's the odd little scuff. Those are just reflections that you can see there. They're not great pictures, but trust me, these cars are absolutely incredible. The engines, if they work, are brilliant. Has the ECU cooling modification chip, which again is a good thing to have on these to make sure that the engine does last. So the stereo doesn't work, paint has suffered a little in places, electric mirrors need investigation, and wipers currently are 1-speed only, which is all pretty much standard TVR stuff. Next, let's see what Lotus have to offer. So Lotus, we'll just do a general search and see what there is under £10,000. So cars, and then sort by price, lowest price. There's a couple of early Elans here, but one's an auction and one's a project. They won't be within budget. There's a later 90s Elan, which I think is probably where we're going to end up. There's a kit car. Let's have a look for 10,000. Well, there is also an Excel, but I think the 90s Elan is what we're going to concentrate on. Now, I never thought I'd be recommending a Lotus as a sensible option, but after that cheap Cerberus, I have to say that these do seem like pretty low risk. Don't let the naysayers fool you either. These were the best handling front drivers of their time, and it was the first Lotus that felt like a real car as opposed to a kit. It would have been a success as well had it not been released at the same time as the MX-5. So Elan, see turbo, £9,000, a little bit under budget. There is a little bit of a cool factor about it. I do think they look quite cool. And interestingly, the design of the dashboard, I mentioned that this was the first Lotus that felt like a real car. Just the dashboard cost Lotus more to design than the whole of any previous car that they had made. Okay, I mean, it looks okay in the pictures. It's at a dealer. 73,000 miles. There's very little mentioned here. Good service history comes with... Okay, I mean, they're not expensive cars to keep, but because they were so cheap for a long time, you do have to be careful with them. Let's have a look at this. Now, I did review one of these before, and it was the same colour as this one. SE Turbo. You could go for naturally aspirated, but I think the turbo only has 160 horsepower anyway, and because they are well within our price range, I would probably go for a turbo. The chassis can definitely handle the power. 85,000 miles. Again, it's a dealer. Leather seats. The other one had cloth seats as well. I do think that they looked a little bit cheap in there. 85,000 miles. Stainless exhaust, disc brakes, upgraded, all original. Recently filmed for Lotus Enthusiast. Channel 27, this is the this is the car that I filmed for my own video. So all of these cars, apart from the first, the Aston, I haven't done reviews on, but all the ones we've gone through and we're going through, I have done reviews on, so I'll put a list of those in the pinned comments on the videos. The owner's a really nice chap. It was quite local to me. He was an enthusiast. He knew what he was doing. But at the time that I did the video, I remember that there was still a few little outstanding things. So I remember it as a good, honest car, but it wasn't perfect, but definitely worth looking at. There's the full leather interior, which definitely looks better than the cloth one on the other car. The engine was produced jointly with Isuzu, and that, you know, it's a nice little unit, fairly unremarkable, I suppose. It's a 4-cylinder turbo, but it doesn't suffer too heavily from turbo lag. If you can't bear the idea of going front-wheel drive, Lotus Elises, the cheapest ones, I think S1s and S2s, are around the 13 to 14, 15,000 pound mark. But they will either be very, very rough, or they will be category cars, so that they have been accident repaired. And we're going to go out with a bang. Let's see what Bentley have to offer. There is a Turbo R for $499, but at that price it will have loads of issues. Now there's GTs as well. I've owned one of these and I simply wouldn't buy one at this price because it will be ruinous. Wow. A Flying Spur GT with obviously a frame wrap on it. Or you'd be brave if you got that. Let's try and find some Turbo Rs. They are much more interesting than a GT, I find. And I think in this price range, I know unbelievably, but they will be a lower risk option. So cars only, lowest price. I thought there was some. Okay, so there's a blue one at 7,000. What you want ideally is, I think, post 1989, because then they came with the injection system, which made it much more reliable and also slightly more fuel efficient. Oh, this is an 87 and it's fuel injected. So this is possibly, I mean, it looks good. It's a nice colour. Let's have a quick flick through the photos. Engine bay looks clean, but these cars are such high quality that they often look very good and still have big problems underneath. But this certainly looks very clean. I can't believe, not sure about the cushions, but I can't believe how much car you can get for this money. 5 previous owners, fuel injected, paintwork, decent history. Okay, I mean, you'd have to go and see it. Seems a little bit cheap to me, but it looks good. Maybe it is just good value. It is a dealer, so I'm sure they are pricing it right. Or not underpricing it anyway. This is an 87, again, so it should be fuel injected if the other one was. The colour is nice. I mean, it's always hard to tell from the pictures because cars generally look fairly good in them. I think I can see a little mark in the veneer on the dash. I think that can be expensive to sort out. Yeah, there it is. They are at least showing it, so that's a good sign. But God, it looks great. See what they're saying. Very good condition, stacks of service history, 7 owner. Last 2 owners over the last 20 plus years, which is good. Asking price to get the car to retail standard. Happy to accept a sensible offer. Runs and drives very well. But since driving, kick down, the gear changes are longer than they initially were. Electric seats currently do not work and has no MOT. For full asking price to be rectified. All sensible offer. So you could try and get it cheaper. Do the work yourself. Again, it slightly worries me though that, you know, it needs things doing. The white one wouldn't be for me personally. This Pro Street looks very cool, but it would be something I would buy either because I think it'd be very hard to get rid of. This is over budget, but I think it'd be worth making a cheeky offer if it turns out. Probably one of the best colours. I love this. I love it in dark blue. God, they're such behemoths, these things. So socially unacceptable, which just makes it all the more appealing. Turbo speeds. Now you have to make sure that the tyres are in good condition because they are a big expense. You cannot get them cheap. Interior looks good. Nice colour combination. Some interiors on these can be quite garish, but just imagine yourself in that in those palatial surroundings. Now, the Turbo Rs, they aren't sports cars. That much is true. But they are incredibly fast. You literally surf on a tidal wave of torque that just lobs you towards the horizon. So it is still a fun thing to have. That engine, oh, you just can't imagine something that big would be able to move that quickly. 71,000 miles, 2 keys, history folder. Now I like the fact that they have sold this before and the previous owner kept it for 5 years. No accident damage, minimal wear and tear. The wood on the dash is great. There's some lacquer peel on the tops of the wood trim on the front doors. And that's it. This is a potentially quite a promising candidate. So out of all these cars, which one would I personally pick? They're all so different. They all have something going for them. I have to say, I think that the XKR, well, and the Chimera actually, they are so undervalued compared to other cars. I mean, the whole market's still a little bit weird at the moment, but the XKRs, the XKs, even a normal XK, they have such a brilliant chassis. There are cars that are ultimately sharper, like the 911, but for everyday use, they have such a fluidity, they have such a flow about their handling. So I'd probably be looking at one of those, but a Chimera has so much presence. It's so different. The way that V8 sounds, I don't know, all of them are a Turbo R. Even looking at these now, I was tempted. I was thinking, because I've been looking at them, I was thinking, maybe I should still replace my CL with one of these. Well, let me know what you think, or if there's any other sort of sportish sports cars, British sports cars, under 10,000 that you think we should consider. Thank you so much for watching. I'll put all the links to the videos of the reviews I've done of these cars in one of the pinned comments and the video description. Thank you and see you soon.